백전백승도동강 새 시대를 열었다. 천리만리의 기상을 온 세상에 떨치자.
Hi, welcome back to Teo the Peopleist, and welcome back to Hard Talks and Human Rights. By now I've talked a lot about the issue of human rights in North Korea. Long story short, it's not good. Some things were getting better, but it's been pretty tough for a lot of people for a while. Political prisons, lack of democracy, starvation, medical issues, violence and executions, very controlled speech and free time, and above all else, very little in the way of escape routes. I cannot name a more difficult country to leave. So that's why I've been so focused on North Korea all this time. But that brings us to today's question, which is, how can we help North Korea? Why haven't we been helping North Korea? Have we been helping North Korea? What more can we do? So today I'm going to try to answer these questions, give a little history on what the world has done for North Korean people, tell you what has changed, and let you know a little bit about a new initiative that I'm a part of. So today's entertainment will be MTG with a revisited Izzet Merfolk deck, which I'm a big fan of. If you want more details on it, check on the combo breaker video from last week. To summarize it in short, basically we have the shapeshifter core here. That triggers all kinds of fun stuff like Merfolk, token generation, and damage pings. Floodcaller over here gives all of our spells, all of our non-creature spells flash, and it causes them to untap the core. So this leads to long turns with lots of value, including token generation, damage, prowess pumps, and card draws. And I also made a couple of small adjustments. Mainly, I had Sharpshooter and I replaced it with Impact Tremors because it is strictly better in this deck, basically because it gets flash off of the Floodcaller and also because it can't be targeted as a creature. And I balanced out my spells a little bit for a little less red damage and more blue draw. Basically, I tossed in one more Rolling Dragonstorm. I took out one of the Abrades, so they're both 2 mana values. So the Rolling Dragonstorm can be pretty useful because you only need 2 cores to go infinite with it. So that's pretty useful. Right, so things are a little bit more balanced out, and yeah, let's give it a go. Let's hop in with this deck. Now, it seems every week, without fail, someone realizes just how bad North Korea is and asks some very basic questions. Why don't people just leave? Why don't we send them some money? What if you just snuck in some news about the outside world and told them how to run away? The answers might seem obvious if you've been studying this issue, but it's not going to be obvious to newcomers to North Korean stuff. The answers, in order, are that they can't because of exit surveillance. We have, and they usually get filtered to the government, but also aren't enough anyway. And we have over the years, but North Koreans aren't nearly as brainwashed as people imagine, so outside news is not enough to cause a revolution. And plus, those that are brainwashed or loyal or whatever their situation is, they won't really care when they hear outside news. But I'll get into the matter of tone and approach later on in this talk, so stand by. But first, a little history. So I've explained this before. The arduous march hit in the 1990s and left some deep marks in the years after. The US had a lot of enemies, and there were plenty of other states in the Second World that we didn't really talk about from the 1950s to the 1990s. Most talks at this time were centered on Russia and China. They were the big guys. Vietnam, which we fought in, and a little on Cuba, which was right next door. The Second World consisted of tons of other countries, especially in Central Asia, but also parts of Africa and the Middle East, which kind of disappeared from US brains until probably 2008 or so. North Korea was only interesting to us back then because, 1, we fought in Korea during the Civil War, and 2, there were quite a few Koreans in America who raised the issue from time to time. But in general, before the 1990s, North Korea didn't really come up that much. And then it did. A lot changed really suddenly, especially after the Soviet Union collapsed. North Korea got economically devastated, Kim Il-sung died, Kim Jong-il took power, North Korea started and advanced its nuclear programs. All these things just suddenly put the country in the eyes of the world and made the US government pretty nervous. I mean, the nuclear development thing. Clinton cared about that, the starving people not so much. So when George Bush did his whole axis of evil thing and realized North Korea was a real place and it actually consists of people and not just one dictator and a bunch of tanks, he was like, whoa, holy moly, would you look at that? Because once you start looking at North Korea in the 2000s, you see all the human rights things, right? Now, a lot has changed, and I'll get into that. But I want to be clear on things. If you know anything about the US, you know that it's divided, right? There's a red and a blue in American politics. So these two groups, these two parties were pretty different 20 years ago. It's been 20 years since the height of the Bush years. That was the last Republican president before Trump. Can you believe that? Republicanism was really different back then, before Epstein bought out 4chan, before the Tea Party movement and all these culture wars. Bush-era Republicanism, it was very Christian. Now, generally speaking, it's the blues who usually care about human rights in the developing world. But I can vaguely recall this time in the past where there was like a sort of, I don't know, Christian sense in the US that the wealthier United States should be helping out the more poor parts of the world. You know, we are the world, feed the children, starving African kids. All that used to be pretty important to American Reds as a kind of, I don't know, Christian value. Maybe that was a Cold War era thing, I'm not sure, but Reds actually really did care about North Korea. Maybe it was genuine humanity, maybe it was anger directed at the nuclear leader, maybe it was hearing about North Korea had no freedom of religion and no democracy, you know, all those liberal things that Reds usually care about. But there was a response. When I say liberal, I mean liberalism as in democracy and freedom of speech, things like that. And because everything is so polarized in the US, the blues, who we associate with human rights now, didn't really focus on North Korea that much. Actually, as the Reds started talking more about North Korean human rights, the blues kind of pulled away from that because it's just like, I can't be friends with you on this issue, right? But I don't know, maybe I overgeneralize. There have always been Reds and blues both who care about North Korean human rights because some people do have principles, regardless of what party they vote for, what tribe they belong to. But for people who don't put North Korea in center view, yeah, it can get politicized really bad. Anyway, the point is, Bush era saw a lot of American support for North Koreans. We sent a lot of food. We criticized Kim Jong-il for human rights violations under his leadership. Was a lot of it just, I don't know, political nonsense, double standards, hatred for a state enemy? Yeah, of course. But many Reds absolutely did care that North Koreans were suffering and they did want to help them. There was and still is a strong Christian movement to help the people of North Korea. By 2007, Clinton and Bush saw over $1 billion. This is 2007 money sent to North Korea. So more than half of that was food aid, like 60% of that billion, so $600 million, right? That was food aid. The rest was energy aid. That's support for development, but it was also kind of paying them to not develop nuclear power and stuff. And that was just the US, right? That billion. There was food and development from South Korea, UN, and the World Food Program deliveries. Europeans and stuff like that actually did care. A lot of people were seriously trying to help in the 2000s. When everyone saw what was going on in North Korea, they were actually really worried. So South Korea gave hundreds of thousands of dollars in food aid every year until 2024. And they gave a lot of technical support, helping North Koreans build all kinds of projects. We're talking like green energy, dams, farming tech, all kinds of things that make it easier to keep people safe and to get them fed. The world did not forget about North Korea at all. It's really unfortunate that the North Korean media only ever focuses on political talk and on sanctions, because while the US has caused a lot of trouble for North Korean development, the US and South Korea, they also did try to do a lot for North Korean people. I mean, not enough, because they never lifted the sanctions. But that's a talk I've been over before. You can watch that one again if you want. There have been development agencies in North Korea for a long time, really. Usually just small teams, like a few dozen people, 20, 30 people, coming from, 10 or 20 countries. There were different UN programs that had workers on the ground over there. And that dropped to 0 people in 2020, and they never came back. A lot changed during COVID, and that was what the North Korean government wanted. Compared to other developing countries, there have never really been that many foreign volunteers on the ground. But I just want to make it clear that for more than 20 years, there were people right there on the ground in North Korea helping out, trying to make things just a little bit better for everyone. And then after COVID, the North Korean government said, we want to lock this country down. They really tried to take more control over their people, and they just got rid of everyone. But seriously, I mean, these volunteers, they did great work, and it's a shame that they weren't allowed to do more. Because the UN really did want to provide help to North Korean people. But the North Korean government always wanted to keep that number of people low. And to be fair, the more people you bring in from outside, the more you have to control them, you have to watch them, and they have no way of knowing who's like a real worker, who's a principled volunteer, and who's just a spy. And I'm not saying that they were spies or anything, but I also don't know. I mean, I can't say 0% of them are spies. I don't have that kind of omniscience. But there was no way to know, So I can't fault the North Korean government for that one specifically. Some of their paranoia has been justified. Now, this is all what we call formal aid. That's countries, big international organizations, and some little organizations supported by those bigger organizations, country governments. That basically what you have is a government either gives money to an organization or they give money to the UN, and the UN gives some of that money to smaller organizations. That's what we call multilateral funding. And that's kind of a system of getting the money all together at the high level and then giving that money out to smaller people who can do projects on the ground. So those were official groups that they were using government money. They were following national plans, getting North Korea's invitation to come in and give some aid. That's formal aid. But there's also two other kinds of aid that I want to talk about, kinds of informal aid, and that's rescue and information. So, rescue, right? Now, again, I was saying that North Korea is really hard to escape, right? You can't just walk out and go home, right? You have to go through China. The Chinese government doesn't want to escape North Koreans. They swing them up with a cartoon net and they just send them right back to North Korea. I got into the ugly details before. You can watch some older videos on that. The point is, getting a North Korean out of North Korea, it's a big operation. It's expensive. It takes a lot of planning. You have to pay North Korean brokers to get someone to the Chinese border. You have to pay Chinese brokers to get a person somewhere safe away from police. You have to pay brokers for fake IDs. You have to pay them to get these North Koreans into trains and in taxis, get them to embassies in China, or get them across the border to Thailand, Vietnam, whatever. You have to pay brokers to get them to an embassy there, to get them safe, to get them onto a plane to South Korea. There's a lot of steps. There's a lot of money that has to be paid. There's a lot of people to pay. There is a whole underground railroad, seriously. It's not very easy to get even one North Korean out of North Korea to somewhere safe. And China's not a safe option, to be clear. It used to cost like $10,000 for one person, and it can cost $40,000, $60,000 now. That's just for one North Korean. That's bribes, security fees, broker fees, transportation, food, all kinds of like risk support fees, because there are a lot of people who are putting their butts on the line when you do this. Look this one up, this group, Liberty in North Korea, LINK. I'm a huge fan of them. They have rescued, 1,400 North Koreans and their children, both from North Korea and from China. Even after COVID, still, they've been rescuing like 30, 40 people every year. They rely on donations. Some of those donations, I imagine, probably come from North Koreans who have already escaped and are living in South Korea. They've reunited 500 families, according to their website. That probably means a lot of people escaped and then called them saying, help me get my brother back, help me get my sister back, and found them a few tens of thousands of dollars. Probably they were working and saving up money in South Korea. I think I mentioned that before. So LINK, they're in touch with brokers. They know how the whole system works. They're doing what they can to make a safe escape operation happen. That is a kind of informal aid people don't talk about much, but it's unbelievably impressive to me. So that's rescue. Then we have information, right? This is a tricky part because it really walks the line between aid and intervention. So first of all, North Korea doesn't have internet. It has an intranet system, which is a network that is 100% controlled by the North Korean government. And it's the same with radio and with TV. If you get really close to the Chinese border, sometimes you can catch some foreign waves, but usually they're jammed. So everything is just censored. So why do they do this? What is the North Korean government trying to do here? Information control. It's a really good way to keep the public asleep. They don't know what the world outside of North Korea looks like. They don't know what they don't have. They don't know who outside of North Korea is a friend and who is an enemy. This helps keep them paranoid. It helps keep them afraid to look and see like what's new. The government, they run the schools, they run the news, they have local information programs. They can kind of like craft a reality for these people. It's absolutely something out of 1984. I know that's trite to say, but there is a whole lot of reality crafting going on. But, to be clear, it's not that North Koreans 100% believe what they hear. They don't believe 100% of what they're told, but they don't really have a good way to find out what's a lie and what's true. I mean, older people who have moved to North Korea from abroad, they have, of course, a better grasp on reality, but the people who were born there, grew up there, they don't have that kind of luxury. So if a teacher at a school in North Korea says the sky is blue and South Korea is 95% poor with people eating rats and children to stay alive, which part do they know to believe? I mean, obviously that's not 0% wrong, but it's not 100%, right? So that's the challenge that they kind of have to put up with when it comes to information control. So it's really easy for the government to really change how people think, but this is changing. I think people used to really avoid complaining about anything in North Korea because they didn't want to get reported or questioned by police or anything like that. But times are changing, or so we hear. More people are doing so-called degenerate things like talking with a South Korean accent or getting sexy haircuts, stuff like that. More people complain about stuff like Chinese getting preferential treatment, Chinese getting treated like kings when they visit North Korea, or they complain about the prices of food, or sometimes they complain about the old days under one of the previous supreme leaders. There was this video recently of Kim Jong-un playing with dogs at a pet shop, and some people in distant villages were so pissed off they really complained about it to friends or something. I caught wind of that and it appeared on one of the news sites. But yeah, all in all, North Korea is not some place where people can just talk about all of their issues and have political debates and stuff like that. Things like complaints and things are kind of like snuck in, hush hush, just among friends. So some of it is cultural, right? But some of it is really engineered by this information control. So for some time now, there have been groups who want to bring in information, people who want to change the inside of North Korea from the outside. Now, there are some big groups and small groups. There's this one organization called Flash Drives for Freedom. They take donated flash drives, USB drives. They fill them up with info and they smuggle them into North Korea. How do they get them in? Well, I don't know. That's a trade secret. No one's told me. But what I imagine is that it involves using the Chinese traders who bring things in across the border somehow. They've gotten 140,000 drives smuggled into North Korea over the years. There's this guy, Kim Sung-min. He escaped North Korea and he started a radio station in South Korea. He used all kinds of information broadcast systems to try to get info into North Korea. It's called Free North Korea Radio, and unfortunately, Mr. Kim passed away last year. And these are some of the small guys, right? But then we have some big guys. So Voice of the People and a few other channels come from South Korea. Voice of America, Radio Free Asia from the US. All of these services, they've been funded by national governments, specifically because they wanted to interfere with the North Korean system of information control. Is this ethical? That's a really huge question here. It's not easy for me to answer because most socialists, and I'm talking like Western socialists, will say absolutely not. Most liberals, Western liberals, will say absolutely yes. My position is that providing information to North Koreans to try to let them see the world is basically a good thing because I believe all humans have the right to information. However, the US and South Korea should not be providing that information for the same reason that the North Korean government should not be providing information. Governments have their politics and they want people to think a certain way. They should not be curating information. They shouldn't go into another country and tell them, this is what you should hear and only this. It needs to be more democratic than that. There's just this big problem with national governments, especially when it comes to other countries. They just have certain things they want people to hear. They want to control the information. They want to control the narrative. So we don't want North Korean government controlling North Korean people's thinking, but we also don't want the US government and the South Korean government to try to control the North Korean government's thinking. There needs to be some better balance there, right? So it needs to be democratic is what I'm saying. It should be small people providing information. So I'll get to that soon. Now, COVID happened, right, in 2020. And then 2024 happened, 2025 happened. Everything I've told you about up until now, all the aid channels, everything, formal, informal, it's pretty much all gone. 2005 or so, North Korea said it doesn't want to get food donations anymore. 2020, COVID happened. North Korea locked the gates, kicked out every single aid worker and most embassy workers just overnight. 2024, North Korea said, screw you, South Korea, and declared it an enemy state. And now, mind you, this is during the Yoon presidency. President Yoon is a huge red, very conservative. He was not very nice to North Korea at all. Lots of reigns of hellfire talk, right? He's not president now, but that doesn't matter that much. North Korea knows that South Korea can be run by a red president at any point, and there will always be red assembly people in national politics. So no more talks, no more aid, nothing. Just North Korea by itself or with its allies, China and Russia, right? No more humanitarian projects from South Korea. They just don't want it. And to be clear, while the Reds are anti-everything North Korea, as I've said before, the Blues are more about cooperation and trying to get Korea back together. They're more sympathetic to North Korea. They They think both Koreas are part of Korea. Whereas the Reds, on the other hand, they just think North Korea and South Korea are two different places, and it's a matter of security politics to them. Now, with formal aid channels closed, this would be a good time for informal aid, right? No. So in 2020, North Korea also installed cameras and barbed wire all along the Chinese border. So rescue operations got really tough. It raised the price a lot. Their technology has been improving. Chinese technology has been improving. Rescue has gotten really hard to do. How about information? So there were information balloons that were being sent across the DMZ before. There were loudspeakers set up along the DMZ, which just blasted all kinds of information in Korean. Radio stations, like I said, Freedom FM, stuff like that was going on, right? So Yoon was conducting like an angry state policy, very aggressive, like we're ready to fight on the ground if need be. And at the same time, he had like an aggressive information policy, what was described as human rights, but realistically it amounted to trying to install South Korean style democracy and force a government collapse in North Korea by empowering the people with kind of pro-democracy information. Again, good or bad, hard to say, but I can say with objectivity that it was not done in respect of North Korean sovereignty. People don't like international interference in their countries. I mean, look up Chinese surveillance, look up Russian bots to see how people feel about other countries getting involved in their internal politics. You'll see what I mean. Now, in 2025, Trump took office, right? At the same time, Lee Jae-myung was taking office in South Korea, a blue president. And you would think an American red and a South Korean blue, those two presidents would be totally at odds with each other. But actually they did almost the same thing for North-South Korea relations and for human rights. Now, if you'll remember, Trump came in 2025 with the Doge thing and Elon Musk, and they just chopped up every foreign aid program, every foreign program that was receiving money from the US people, which was a lot of NGOs. It was also Radio Free Asia and Voice of America. VOA was out for 9 months before they came back on air. Radio Free Asia stopped airing to North Korea. So ironically, Trump made good friends with socialists who side with North Korea. I'm still not entirely sure how I feel about this whole thing, but at least I'm not happy about the cuts to NGO support. Meanwhile, in the South side, right, in South Korea, Blue Lee walks in with his friendship policy. He says, we're going to be good friends with North Korea again, just watch. And then the same week, Kim Jong-un's sister tells him he has no balls and they're not going to take any of his phone calls. But Lee will not give up on trying to be the next Moon. By the way, President Moon was actually pretty effective in getting South and North Korea to talk. President Moon was also blue. So yeah, Lee cuts off everything, right? All the loudspeakers, all the leaflet drops. He makes it illegal to send news into North Korea. Just all at once, he cuts everything off. Kim Jong-un still hates him. So that's where we are now with information organizations, formal and informal. All of them have been gutted. But we're not out of hope. We're not out of options. We're just not as well off as we were before. We're back in this situation where we cannot count on state governments to fix human rights problems. So now we're trying to do what we can from a more individual level, from a small organization level. There's a new group that popped up at the end of last year. They're trying to do more of like a radio-free Voice of America kind of thing. They're called Korea Internet Studio. They are a group that is trying once again to reach North Koreans. Now, the difference is it's not a state project. It's not a CIA project or whatever. It is run entirely by North Koreans in South Korea. It's their own idea, their own goal, their own dream. A lot of information groups before tried to use special radio technology to reach North Koreans. So as you might guess, North Korea jams outside radio waves. So Radio Free Asia and others like that, they were using anti-jamming tech to get their radio waves into North Korea. But that's not what KIS does. They use the internet. So let's hold on here, right? Internet, right? Let's rewind a little bit. We already established North Korea is not connected to the global internet, not in the usual sense. Average North Koreans can't just use YouTube. So what is KIS actually doing? We get asked this quite a lot. The thing is, North Koreans actually leave their country a lot these days. Maybe hundreds of thousands of North Koreans are working in China, Russia, and a few different countries every year, right? So when they're abroad, they have a chance to use the internet somewhat freely. So the question is, what are they going to look up and watch, right? You have to keep in mind, these people are from North Korea, where eyes are everywhere. They're in a foreign country. They don't know the rules. They don't understand how technology fundamentally works and how it's regulated. They're being very cautious. They're learning new technology in a new way. So they don't want to snitch on themselves. We don't expect them to just, I don't know, go to Google or to whatever Chinese Google is, Baidu, and type in, how do I escape from China? How do I escape from Russia? We don't think that they're going to just, jump right in head first, right? But what we know is they do have some use patterns, right? We expect them to use Korean language, sometimes other languages, to look things up. We know North Korean dialect is different from South Korean dialect. And we know a lot of the words they use because we have a bunch of North Koreans on our team. We are researching to try to figure out, how do they use the internet? What are their prompts? What are their call signs, right? So that we can try to cater to their algorithms. You know about the YouTube algorithm, right? Like they sneak up on you and try to get you to watch things that they think you'll like. We're trying to do the same thing for them, trying to get into their algorithm. Because, targeted video media, it's already a thing on the internet. I mean, if you're here on this channel, then you've probably already searched for North Korean stuff at some point. So there's another thing too, right? Just because North Koreans watch a video, it doesn't mean that video is going to be good for them, all right? Think like this, okay? I don't know what country you're from, but imagine a video from the North Korean government. Imagine that there are people in their robes and military hats and stuff, and they have their chanting voices, and they talk about how much your country just sucks, how it's run by an evil dictator with nuclear ambitions, and there's no food and no freedom. I just imagine like someone talking about America, like, oh, everyone in America is starving to death, and they're all being chased around by the police and all the time. I mean, you're gonna feel a little bit awkward, right? Or I don't know, maybe pissed off. You're gonna ask, is this a joke or something? Like, why is this foreign country talking all this smack about us? What do they even know about our country? So it's the same issue with North Korea. Some people have this idea that if you just tell North Koreans everything about the world, tell them stuff like, your government's killing you, you have no freedom, everyone else in the world has a good life, America's free, Europe is free, South Korea is free. People think that if you tell them this stuff, somehow they're just going to say, oh yeah, okay, thank you for opening my eyes. No, that doesn't really make sense if you think about it. I mean, it's this really critical position from the opposite side of the world. You have to deliver your thoughts in the right way. You have to reach them with the way you're talking. Now, their ears are open a little bit. They've been living in these other countries that are much more comfortable than North Korea. They're not stuck in the illusion. We hear that the North Koreans who lived in China found it actually much nicer than North Korea. So they're willing to take in some new information, but there are some levels to it. And some of these people, they honestly really do hate Kim Jong-un. But, sometimes they just want to turn on the tube to hear something more familiar. They want to hear a North Korean accent or someone talking about North Korea like it's a real place where things go on. They're open to a little bit of criticism, but you need to keep these things in mind when you try to talk to them, when you try to give them something to listen to. So I've been trying to work on that. I've been trying to give news briefings about North Korea that say what's going on in North Korea, but don't make it sound like North Korea is a bad guy. You know what I mean? That's actually kind of easy for me personally, because sometimes I agree with them. The North Korean government has been really nasty about US and Israel attacking Iran, US attacking Venezuela, and I don't disagree with them on that. I mean, of course, for me, I can say the US without adding the imperialist dogs or something to that end, but it's easy enough for me to be critical of US foreign policy. That's not the hard part. So that's the general idea, right? That we're going to give global information to North Koreans with a sort of North Korean accent, more neutrality, more respect for North Korea as a country of people with its own government. And they've been warming up to it. They've been reaching out to us to tell us how much they appreciate our programming. We don't know how many people who are messaging us, commenting, are real people. We don't know how many are civilians and how many are some kind of agents trying to get under our skin. We've definitely seen some remarks that come from Pyongyang agents that have like this really clear, angry tone to them, saying things like, leave our country alone, imperialist dogs, and stuff like that. But, we're not going to let it faze us. We're just trying to be as impartial, non-political as possible while doing what we can to help North Koreans from people who just care about North Korean humans. So to wrap it up, that's a brief history of how the world has reached out to North Korea. It's not all good. It's not all bad. Politics has interfered with goodwill on both sides of the divide. We have a lot of obstacles, but we've made some real inroads. We've helped a lot of people. A lot of people have escaped starvation. A lot of people have escaped North Korea. Little by little, we're really getting to the heart of human rights, and we're doing what we can to help human beings. Not everyone will understand what we've been doing. Some are going to misrepresent our cause or complain that we're not doing enough, but that's fine. Everyone's a critic. There are those that pay attention, and those people they're going to see what it is we care about, and they're going to see how much we care. And that's peopling.